Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking closely at a really important and personal topic. It's all based on sources you shared with us.
Exactly. You've given us this very powerful personal story about dealing with Lyme disease.
Right, and it's layered with data points, observations pulled from different websites. It gives a pretty full picture.
It really does. It's this mix of, one person's direct experience, the ups and downs, the diagnosis challenges, but also alongside these reported statistics, it shows how much bigger this issue is becoming.
Yeah, it paints quite a picture. So our mission today in this deep dive is really to unpack all of that. We want to understand the reported facts about ticks, about Lyme,
Explore the symptoms described, the whole treatment landscape as laid out in the sources.
and just see what lessons we can pull from this personal story and the data combined. So let's jump right in.
Sounds good. It's quite a journey, touches on everything from, well, a tiny insect bite right up to these broader public health questions.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning of the story you shared, that first encounter. The tick bite.
Yeah, the source mentions getting bitten back on June 26. They were walking through some brush, under trees.
In a place called Parc Masca, described as about 6 kilometers from the eastern townships in Quebec.
And interestingly, the first sign wasn't even seeing it. They felt something actually fall onto their head first.
Right, like something just landed there.
Yeah.
And then it took, what, 2 or 3 days?
Yeah, 2 or 3 days later, changing clothes, that's when they actually spotted the tick on the leg.
Finding it felt like a big deal, but the immediate reaction, well, the source notes, they crushed it.
And they point out, in hindsight, that wasn't the recommended way to remove it.
Understandable in the moment, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, highlights the need to know the right way.
Exactly. Good point made by the source there.
So right after that bite, the first major symptom that showed up was this really intense nausea.
Yeah, described as persistent, coming and going, familiar nausea, but much, much worse this time.
And that went on for about 2 weeks, apparently.
Right, and the source mentioned using lime and ginger drinks to try and get some relief during that time.
Simple remedies for a tough symptom.
Yeah.
Okay, so after that nausea eventually eased up, the focus in the sources kind of shifts.
Yeah, it moves to this broader realization the source had about just how common ticks actually are, much more than they'd thought, especially in Quebec and Canada generally.
It's like the personal experience suddenly connected to this bigger picture. They went from not really being aware to citing specific numbers.
Numbers from places like Lyme, the Quebec government website, it really shows the shift in awareness.
And those numbers, they are quite striking, aren't they?
They really are. According to the data cited, reported cases Canada-wide jumped significantly.
From 144 in 2009
to 987 in 2016. And the source points out that's more than a 6-fold increase reported between 2009 and 2015 alone.
Wow, yeah. And by 2015, cases were being reported from 9 provinces.
That's right. BC, Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland and Labrador. Coast to coast, essentially.
But the concentration is interesting. The data you shared highlights that over 91% of those 2015 cases came from just 3 provinces.
Ontario, Nova Scotia, and Quebec, those 3.
And Nova Scotia really stands out in that data.
It does. Highest incidence rate in 2015, 26.1 cases per 100,000 people. The source emphasizes that's 10 times the national average for that year.
10 times. That really gives you a sense of the regional hotspot there.
Definitely. And Quebec specifically, the numbers show that same upward trend. 32 cases in 2011.
Up to 160 in 2015, then 179 in 2016. Clear increase.
And they even pinpoint some risk areas in Quebec, based on the websites mentioned. Montérégie, southwest of Mauricie.
Center of Quebec, it says north and west of the region of Saint, though the Saint isn't totally clear.
Right, and the southwest of Outaouais as well, so specific zones are being identified.
The sources also try to explain why this is happening, why the increase.
Well, it's reported that these black-legged ticks, or deer ticks, they're established now and they're spreading.
Through migration. Right.
Exactly. Songbirds are mentioned. They can carry ticks really long distances. Also mice, deer, even our pets.
And the climate aspect, too?
Warmer winters, fewer ticks get killed off by the cold, so their populations can just grow more easily. They're crossing borders, expanding their range.
So it's not just a deep-in-the-woods problem anymore. It's closer to home.
Seems that way. And a really critical point the sources make is where ticks tend to hide on us.
Dark, moist places, it says. Groin, underarms, back of the neck.
Behind the ear, too. Places you might not easily see or feel. And that's key. The bites are often hard to feel.
Yeah. And connecting back to the personal story, the source makes this crucial point. You don't always get the bullseye rash,
Absolutely vital information. The speaker specifically says they did not have that rash.
which is such a common misconception, isn't it? That you have to have the rash for it to be Lyme.
It is, and not having it can really delay people seeking help, sadly.
Makes diagnosis way harder, especially when you look at the range of symptoms the source describes experiencing after that initial nausea phase.
Yeah, the sources describe the symptoms as, well, complex and often really debilitating.
And they don't all pop up at once, right? They can develop over time.
Exactly, it takes time. And the source notes, if it's untreated, the outcomes can be serious, attacking the neurological system, potential paralysis.
Even links, reportedly, to conditions like Parkinson's or Lou Gehrig's disease down the line. That's pretty heavy.
It really underscores the potential severity. So for the speaker in this story, after the nausea faded, this next wave hit hard.
First, joint pain, described as excruciating in all joints. That sounds awful.
Followed by incredible weakness. Just debilitating fatigue.
Then the fevers started. Persistent ones, sometimes low grade, sometimes high.
Eventually led to being bedridden for a time. And before the sore throat hit, there was a stiff neck and horrible headaches.
And then the sore throat, plus mucus in the throat, chest, head. Like a bad sinus or bronchial thing.
Yeah, which they apparently managed with the cortisone spray at the time. It just shows how it can affect multiple systems.
A real constellation of symptoms. And unfortunately, the source says even after getting some initial treatment, some symptoms came back.
Joint pain seems to be the most persistent issue now, along with chronic fatigue, the sore throat, coughing, and a low-grade fever at night.
To the point of needing narcotics for the joint pain and needing a full day just to recover from working 2 days a week.
It sounds absolutely exhausting, and it leads right into the challenges the source describes with diagnosis and treatment in Canada.
Yeah, described as a politically charged issue.
The source, citing Lyme, but with a little disclaimer about quoting exact stats,
Right, they're careful there.
asserts that Canada has, in their words, very poor Lyme testing facilities compared to the U.S.
And the problem, as reported, is that many Canadians who actually have Lyme end up getting negative test results here.
Which means people can stay sick for years. They kind of fall through the cracks, as the source puts it, develop chronic Lyme.
And this situation, it forces people to travel, right?
Yeah, often to the U.S., which is described as costing doodles and oodles of money.
Huh. Memorable phrase from the source there.
Or sometimes to Ontario, where testing is apparently seen as a bit better.
It sounds like there's some recognition of this problem, though. Lobbying efforts mentioned.
Yes, in the U.S. and starting up in Canada, too, pushing for better tests, updated treatment guidelines.
And there's even a quote in the source material attributed to an MP.
A member of parliament, yeah, saying, this has to stop, referring to Canadians having to spend their own money to get treated stateside.
That's quite telling. And the speaker's own experience trying to get diagnosed really mirrors these bigger issues.
Totally. Went to an emergency room, St. Mary's, said they saw the tick, had symptoms.
Or reportedly refused testing, told it was probably just a virus.
Exactly. Eventually got referred to an infectious diseases clinic at the Jewish General.
And received antibiotics there for 2 weeks.
That's right. And they felt better for maybe 5 days, but then symptoms came back, almost as bad as before.
Ugh. And then there's the financial side. Insurance won't pay without that 100% positive standard test result, it seems.
Which puts the source in this really tough spot, needing a positive test for diagnosis, for coverage.
But also having reservations about the standard treatment itself, which they mentioned involves long-term antibiotics. They call it a negative aspect.
Yeah, it leads right into this whole discussion in the sources about different treatment approaches, the conventional versus, well, alternatives.
The standard medical approach is described mostly as rounds and rounds of antibiotics.
And the source refers to these as chemicals. It expresses concern that it's not a good solution, especially long-term. Mentions some people are on them for years.
So this perspective clearly led the source to look elsewhere, right? Explore other options based on testimonials they found.
One approach mentioned is the raw vegan diet.
Okay, and what did they find there?
Well, they describe finding a lot of success stories. People reportedly recovering fully without antibiotics, or even stopping antibiotics and getting better that way.
But the source is careful to say they're not, like, pushing veganism.
Right, exactly. They explicitly state that. Just sharing what they found in terms of recovery stories linked to that diet.
Got it. Another big element in this alternative view seems to be about keeping the body alkaline.
Yes, the idea of maintaining an alkaline state for overall health, it's emphasized as important.
And how do they suggest doing that?
Reportedly, by avoiding acidic foods. The list includes processed foods, meat, dairy, refined sugars, coffee, alcohol.
The usual suspects for many health-focused diets, really.
Pretty much. And the source actively practices this by drinking a lot of alkaline water.
Oh, interesting. Did they say how they make it?
Yeah, actually provided a simple DIY recipe. 3 liters of water, add cut lemon or lime slices, let it sit in the fridge for about 12 hours.
Simple enough.
And they mention you can add other things too, like mint, cucumber, or ginger, noting ginger is especially good for that nausea they experienced.
Right, back to the ginger. So you really see this contrast playing out in the sources you shared, the standard medical path.
And then this exploration of diet alkalinity based largely on other people's reported experiences. It shows the search for answers when facing these kinds of challenges.
It really does. And through all this, the story, the data, the treatment explorations, there are some really clear takeaways the source wants listeners, wants you to understand.
Absolutely. First and foremost, ticks are here to stay. The source is very clear on that. They see it becoming more and more of a problem.
Because of that, the big message is inform yourselves, get educated.
And a key point from their own experience, you don't need to be deep in the wilderness. They got bitten just walking in a park.
Yeah, that really hits home. It can happen anywhere.
So knowledge is vital for yourself, for your kids, for your pets.
The call to action is pretty direct. Learn about ticks, how to protect yourself,
Where to look on your body, those hiding spots we mentioned.
and, crucially, how to remove a tick properly if you find one.
They also suggest being proactive more broadly. If you see petitions for better Lyme testing or treatment, consider signing them, if that feels right for you.
And they really encourage checking out the links they provided. Websites like CanLyme, government info, documentaries, success stories.
Yeah, lots of resources mentioned to dig deeper.
Ultimately, the source just wants to share their reality. It's an ongoing thing they're dealing with, hoping for recovery, exploring different ways to get there.
Yeah.
Wow. So taking all that in, that journey from the bite through all those very difficult symptoms, hitting those diagnosis walls the data reflects.
And then exploring these quite different paths toward potentially healing. It's a lot. It's really comprehensive and, frankly, quite intense.
It is. It really highlights the personal struggle against these bigger systemic issues. And that contrast you mentioned is stark, isn't it?
Definitely. Between the established medical route, which the source views cautiously, and these alternative methods focused on diet and alkalinity. Plus, that whole political dimension mentioned about getting chronic Lyme recognized and properly treated in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. So the core message the source seems to want to leave you, the listener, with is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Educate yourself. Ticks are out there, more than maybe we thought.
And the issues around getting diagnosed and treated, as described here, are clearly significant for a lot of people. It's not simple.
Not at all. Which leads us to maybe a final thought to leave you with.
Right. Given these described difficulties, trouble getting a clear diagnosis via standard tests, and then these very different approaches to healing presented, rooted in personal stories and community experiences alongside the official data, it raises a big question, doesn't it? How do you navigate all that? How do you figure out the best path forward when you're facing something complex, potentially chronic like this, trying to make sense of all these different perspectives to find help and hopefully relief?